It was well past midnight when I got onto that train. Actually, I shouldn't say got onto, I stumbled onto. The truth is, I had a few drinks and was trying to make up for lost time. There was a woman with a suitcase, a guy with a guitar case, and the two guys sitting opposite each other and talking in hushed voices. I settled down on my bench and closed my eyes, planning to sleep all the way home. I had missed my original train by mere seconds, cursing the guy in front of me who stopped to tie his shoe when we were almost at the station. The doors were open and I could see his face clearly. I turned back to look at the guy in the seat. He wasn't there anymore. I whipped back around. I followed the man down the train until I got to the same spot where he had been sitting. I stepped out of the carriage, expecting to find him at the end of the line. Instead, I found a closed door. There was a single bare bulb at the top of the stairs, casting grotesque shadows everywhere. At the bottom of the stairs was another locked metal door. I tried to handle and then pushed against the door. I scrambled over the gravel and debris, desperate to escape this nightmare. As I ran, the trees grew darker and twisted into unnatural shapes. The ground beneath my feet cracked and split open. She was hunched over and couldn't have been more than 80 years old. I shook my head, too shocked to speak. "You can sit if you want to," she rasped, gesturing to a chair next to hers. "James," I whispered, unable to take my eyes off the train. "Nice to meet you, James," she replied. There was a long pause. "Do you know how you got here?" she finally asked. I shook my head again. The train's whistle blew mournfully in the distance. I sat down and the rocking chair creaked ominously. Her wrinkled hands rested on her lap. She watched me approach and beckoned me inside. I hesitated for a moment, uncertain of what to expect. I looked back at the train and saw that it had stopped outside the house. Purgatory? Was this a joke? The voice continued. "Get aboard. All aboard the train to nowhere. All aboard, all aboard." The train began to move again. Its wheels screeched on the tracks. The doors slid open and a voice echoed through the train. "Next stop, Purgatory." But the train was still there, its presence looming over me like a specter. Was the train really taking me to Purgatory? I pulled myself together and decided to explore. The train was plunging deeper and deeper into the darkness. Then it faded away. I slumped to the floor and cried out into the darkness. I looked out the window and saw that the tunnel had no end. Next stop, Purgatory. I turned back to the doors and pounded on them. And the old woman's kind smile was too much to resist. There was a ticket at the bottom. I reached in and pulled it out. The ticket read, "One-way ticket to Purgatory." On the back was a date. It was today's date, but it was too late. I was already on the train. The doors slid shut and the train lurched forward. I looked back at the house and saw the old woman's face pressed against the window. There were no seats, just rows upon rows of coffins. They were all empty except for one. I walked slowly towards it, drawn to it like a moth to a flame. The coffin was made of dark wood and had tarnished silver handles. It was adorned with a brass plaque that read, "All aboard the train to nowhere." "They all got off," she whispered. "But you were supposed to get off long ago." The train was getting closer now. I could hear its wheels screeching on the tracks, and I could hear the grinding of its wheels on the tracks. I recoiled in horror, stumbling backward until I hit a coffin. I looked down at the hand and saw that it was attached to a skeleton wearing a conductor's uniform. The skeleton beckoned me closer. Then I heard a voice in my head. It was the old woman's voice, but it sounded different, distorted. It didn't budge. I started to panic. What was this place? Where was everyone? And why couldn't I leave? The guy was closer now, his eyes wide, staring straight at me, his mouth hanging open in a silent scream. It was made of metal and locked. I rattled the handle and shouted for help, but nothing happened. I looked up at her in confusion. The last what? The train lurched violently, shaking the ground beneath us. "The last one to get off," she explained, her voice barely audible over the din. I could hear the man's silent screams in my head. I asked, my voice trembling. The woman didn't respond. She just kept staring at the train. Then she suddenly turned to me, and her eyes filled with urgency. "You have to get out of here," she rasped, "before it's too late." "Yes, get off," the old woman repeated, her eyes fixed on the train. "Before it's too late. Before what is too late? Too late how?" The woman didn't answer. She just kept staring at the train. I hammered at the door, and it finally swung open. I could hear his heartbeat over the sound of the train. And then I noticed something very strange. The woman with the suitcase was gone. It was wearing the same clothes as the man I had seen earlier, a blue shirt and black trousers. The bones were brittle and fell apart when I touched them. The skull fell off and landed at my feet. It stared up at me with empty sockets. As he made his way to the end of the train, I called out to him, "Hey, are you okay? Did you see that?" In the distance, I could see the faint glow of sunlight. I raced toward it, but he kept walking without answering, without even acknowledging that I was there. I looked around wildly, unsure of what I had seen. Light spilled from its windows and beckoned me closer. As I approached, I could see that it was a shack with peeling paint and boarded-up windows. Smoke rose from a chimney, and I could hear a faint humming sound coming from within. I felt like I had dozed off, and when I opened my eyes, I realized there was only one other passenger on the train. The guy with the guitar case had disappeared. And then I had gotten into an argument with the ticket lady when she said there would be a surcharge because I wanted to take my bike with me. Turns out the next train was going to be free, so I took it. I was one of only 3 people on the car. When I opened them again, the train was plunged into darkness for a second before the overhead lights flickered back on. Just as I started to get freaked out, the train lurched suddenly, throwing me forward and making me bang my head on the seat in front. "Watch it," snapped the guy with the briefcase. "You almost gave me a heart attack." He eyed me suspiciously before returning to whatever it was he was reading. I decided to ignore him and look out the window. That's when I saw another man standing in the carriage behind me. I don't know how long we stood there staring at each other, but eventually he turned and walked away slowly, still screaming silently. He reached the end of the train and vanished. One second he was there, the next he was gone. But this was a train. You never found doors. I went back into the carriage to get to the other side and found the door waiting for me. On the other side was a narrow staircase that led down into darkness. As I turned to go back up the stairs, I saw a skeleton lying at the bottom of them. I ran up the stairs and out of the carriage. That's when I realized the train had stopped moving. There was a lever on the side of the train. I pulled it open and jumped onto the tracks. Then I saw a house in the distance. An old woman was sitting by the window. She sat in a rocking chair and asked me, "Can I get you anything?" "Some water, maybe." "What's your name?" the woman asked. "You're the last one," the old woman said quietly. The train's whistle blew again, louder this time. "Get off?" I asked, confused. I looked back at her and saw that her face was filled with sadness. "What happened here?" I asked softly. "Who's supposed to get off?" I wanted to ask her what was going on, but the train was getting closer now. "Welcome aboard," it said. "Your final destination awaits." I stumbled back in horror. The old woman screamed, "Don't get on. Please don't get on." Then the train plunged into darkness. I groped for the emergency brake, but it was gone. But there was no escaping this train. The voice boomed again. "Welcome aboard the train to nowhere." Where am I? Where is everybody? Why did the old woman want me to get off the train? The train was dirty and smelled of decay. As I reached out to touch it, a skeletal hand shot out and grabbed my wrist. With trembling hands, I opened the coffin lid and peered inside. The train lurched to a halt and the doors slid open. I looked out and saw endless darkness. The conductor's voice echoed through the train.